My name is Brandon Brown. I'm going to be explaining the Job Instruction Training Timetable. This example was made by a supervisor who's responsible for a few tasks in her department. Of course, your jobs are going to be maybe a little different, but as the idea works out the same everywhere, please pay attention to how to make a timetable. We can do this with pencil and paper very easily, and they can be updated in just a few seconds. First, we fill in the header section, state who made it, when it was made, and by whom. This was a supervisor named Jones. She filled in the names of her department jobs in the left column, and they are caps on bottles, cap corking, manual carton forming, auto carton forming, palletizing, filler startup. Once she had made those, she decided to look at her workers and list them across the top. There was Smith, Lark, Morse, Taylor, Massey, Peters, and Baker. Next, she went and evaluated each person's skill on whether they were fully trained or not. Smith was fully trained on all of the jobs. Lark had been there for quite a while and had been trained on everything, but not been trained on the filler startup. Morse was the most veteran employee. He had been trained on every job and was very proficient. On Taylor, Jones checked off all the boxes for caps, cap torquing, etc. until she got to palletizing. She made a different mark. She made a star in that box, and we'll come back to that later. She thought Taylor's performance on palletizing was just a little off on some of the types of pallets, the stacking organization that they have. Next, Massey could do all of the jobs down to palletizing without any trouble. Peters had been here less than 6 months, but he had been trained on caps on bottles, cap torquing, manual carton forming, and palletizing. Baker was the most recently hired employee. She had only been trained on capping bottles and the manual carton forming. Next, Jones looked at any possible turnover. She knew that Morse was giving his retirement date on December the 15th, just shortly before Christmas. So that exposed an area around the filler startup where she would only be left with one person, Smith. Next, she looked at changes in the schedule. There was a new product, a new carton coming, new bottle size. It's going to be 6 bottles in a carton, and that was going to cause a little bit of new product to be run across the auto carton former. So what changes in schedule, that product was hit November the 13th. So she made a note, need one by November 13th. So since the job instruction breakdown had already been created, job number 1 on the auto carton forming, she decided to set a date of November the 3rd, this being made on October the 2nd. She felt that by November the 3rd, she could check the box there and have Baker fully trained. Next was Taylor's palletizing. And since that was fairly familiar to Taylor, only on a few of the palletizing standards, Jones thought that October 23rd would be a good date to have Taylor completely fully trained. So October 23rd, Jones wants to check that box as fully trained rather than October 23rd. Next is Morse retirement. So as Jones began to think about the training that she had to do with the other employees, she felt like November 18th would be a good day to have completed the training for Lark. And Lark seemed like the most suitable candidate, being most veteran, to be able to pick up on the filler startup. So she decided to put November 18th. Next is numbering the job breakdowns. The second one needed after the carton forming and coming up sooner actually than that training was the palletizing. So she began to work on the job breakdown for palletizing so that she would have in time for October 23rd's final date to have Taylor trained. Next, the job breakdown she needed to work on was the filler startup. That would be job breakdown number 3 because she would need that job breakdown to train Lark on November the 18th. She set a due date to have those job breakdowns completed. So since Taylor's training needed to be completed October 23rd, where the star's at, she made a note of October 12th to have the job breakdown completely finished, road tested, and ready to go. Next was the job breakdown number 3 for the filler startup. And since that due date to have Lark trained by November the 18th, she decided to set a due date on herself for November the 1st. So she wrote that date by the filler startup as the due date to have the job breakdown completed, and she would have plenty of time to test it out, make sure it works for Lark's training on November the 18th. The job training timetable is pretty much done. The process is pretty simple. You fill out the supervisor's name, department, and date that the job training timetable is being made. Fill in the job headings. If there are a variety of jobs, you might write the job names, or when all the jobs are the same, you might list them by classification or maybe levels of skill that someone needs to know to operate a particular piece of machinery. Next, fill in the workers' names across the top. Check off the jobs that can be done by each of them. Use a check mark if the person is compliant with all of the job standards and can competently do the job and proficiently perform the duties. The star was used for any area of performance needs. The 5th step is then to spot training needs. And if you remember, Jones looked at the workers from the standpoint of any turnover. That might be FMLA coming up, vacation, or poor performance issues that needed to have some attention. Next, job headings, and when she needed to meet schedules or changes in production was evaluated. And since there was a change in schedule for a new product, she made plans for that as well. 6th step is to plan to meet the needs. Who are we going to train, on which job, and by what date? So thank you for listening to how to make a training timetable using the job instruction method. Thank you.